The Department of Public Health and Human Services is pleased to bring you Aging Horizons. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, fraud, legal issues, veterans benefits, and caregiving. Aging Horizons is a program dedicated to inform and prepare Montanans on these timely issues, making a difference to you and your loved ones. Here now is today's program host.
Hi everyone. Today on Aging Horizons, we've got a really good show for you. Very important information. We're going to be talking about cardiovascular disease. We're going to talk about what it looks like, what it is, and most importantly, what we can do to prevent it. Because remember, prevention is always best. You don't want to wait until you're so far in you can't do anything about it. We've got lots to tell you about, so stay tuned.
Every 65 seconds, someone is affected with Alzheimer's or other dementias. Many become isolated at a time when help is most needed. If you or someone you love is affected, help is available, both for people with memory loss and their caregivers. Memory loss can feel frightening, but you are not alone. Call the free 24/7 Alzheimer's Association helpline, 800-272-3900, for guidance and support.
This is Bill. He just received his new Medicare card and is following some simple rules to protect himself from fraud. He knows to never give out his Medicare, Social Security, or bank number over the phone. And this is Nancy. She knows that to detect any problems, she always reads her Medicare Summary Notice or Medicare Advantage EOB to make sure the billing is correct. Both Bill and Nancy know that anything suspicious can be reported to Montana SMP at 1-800-551-3191.
45 years, 2 packs a day. That's like $80,000. I thought I was just hurting myself until I fell asleep in a chair with a cigarette. The whole house went up. I lost it all. I knew smoking was expensive, but I never thought it would cost me everything.
The human heart. Even at its strongest, it's a fragile muscle. Chest and arm pain, shortness of breath, are signs of a heart under attack. But 3 numbers can save a life. Dial 911 at the first sign of a heart attack. Quick response from medical experts can save your life.
I was 45 and it happened to me, a heart attack.
Dialing 911 saved Ryan's life. Now he's here and he's healthy.
This message sponsored by Mission Lifeline Montana.
Hi everyone, welcome to Aging Horizons, brought to you by the Department of Public Health and Human Services. I'm your host, Kimmy Everman, and today we're going to be talking about something kind of huge, something kind of important, but also something that you can do some things about, and that's cardiovascular disease. We have with us today Mike McNamara. Mike, nice to have you back. And you are the cardiovascular disease specialist for the state of Montana, or some part of that.
Yeah, that's pretty close. That's good.
Okay. So you are uniquely qualified to talk to us about this today. I think, first of all, we might call it CVD, cardiovascular disease. Tell us a little bit about that, and especially what's it looking like in Montana.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me back, Kimmy. I think this is my 4th or 5th time.
I know,
so
you're an old hat.
I enjoy coming and talking with you. Cardiovascular disease includes heart attack and stroke. So it kind of encompasses, it's not just one thing, and it's not just centered in one part of the body. It affects both our brain and our heart.
Right.
And it's the #1 cause of death in the industrialized world. And that's true for Montana as well. And annually, it takes about 2,500 Montanans away from us every year. So it's pretty significant.
Yeah.
And the fortunate thing is that cardiovascular disease is preventable.
Well, you know, and we talked a little bit about that off camera, Mike. Let's talk further about that and get really specific. What are some of those risk factors that we need to be thinking about?
Yeah, so when we talk about cardiovascular disease, it's important to kind of understand what contributes to it or what can cause that. And we refer to those as risk factors. And when we talk about the risk factors, there's really 2 main categories. There are categories that we have control over. And typically those are lifestyle things how we live our life.
Sure.
And making changes can have a big impact on that. And the other major category risk factors are things that we don't have any control over. So I'll just talk about the ones that we can't control first.
Okay.
Because we can't control them, but I think it's so important that we're aware of them, because that can give us a clue that maybe we really need to focus on those things that we can control
Right.
to prevent something from happening in the
And
future.
get proactive.
That's right. So the ones that we don't have any control over is your family history, your genetics. If your mother or father had a heart attack or a stroke at an early age, in their 40s or 50s, that could mean that there's maybe a genetic component that was passed down to you. So you can't change who your parents were, you can't change your genetics. So that should be a real red flag that, this could be something that runs in my family. So
Right.
you'd really want to make sure your doctor is aware of the fact that you could have a family history of it.
Right.
So you can really be proactive with those things that you can control.
Right.
So we talk about genetics being one. The next one is age. Cardiovascular disease typically doesn't happen overnight. It's a progressive disease.
Oh,
so
sure, yeah.
It can start when you're, young and just gradually get to the point where it actually causes a problem. So that tells us that the older you get, the more likely you're going to have a chance of having some form of cardiovascular disease. Okay, and we can't change our age as much
Right.
as we'd like to.
Right.
And then the last one is our gender. Men typically have cardiovascular events at an earlier age than women. But women, if we looked at the total numbers, women are right up there with the men. It's the number one cause of death for both men and women.
Sure.
But the only difference is it seems to affect men at an earlier age.
Sure.
So those are the things that we can't control. So let's talk about the things that we can control.
Please, let's.
So that's the bad news. Now let's talk about the good
let's
news.
have the good news.
So the first one is high blood pressure. It's often referred to as hypertension, and it simply means that your blood pressure is too high. And that has a big impact on pretty much every system in our body.
Yeah.
So a huge risk factor for both heart attack and stroke. So if you have high blood pressure, you definitely want to work on controlling that and getting the blood pressure into a normal range. The next one is having high cholesterol. Cholesterol can be related to genetics. I mean, there are people who have very strict diets but still have high cholesterol.
Sure.
But I would say the majority of people, a big contributor to having high cholesterol is eating a diet that's high in saturated fats.
Sure.
And those are fats that come from animals. So kind of our favorite foods like bacon and fatty cuts of meat.
Dang nabbit.
Yeah, well, so having high cholesterol certainly contributes
Certainly,
to cardiovascular disease, as does diabetes. Diabetes is a really big risk factor for both heart attack and stroke. And then as we kind of go down the list, lack of exercise. And one of the real benefits of exercise is that it has such a positive impact on the other risk factors.
Yeah.
So exercise can help with your blood pressure, it can help with diabetes, it can help with cholesterol, it can help with your weight. So if you're not engaging in regular exercise, you're really missing the benefits that
And you
has
can tick off
on other
all those
things.
boxes.
That's right.
Sure, yeah.
That's right. Smoking is another big one.
Yeah.
I think I've said it before on this program, if I were to invent cigarettes in my garage, there's no way in the world it would ever come to market just because of how detrimental it is.
Right.
Next, as we start looking down the list, is poorly controlled stress.
Oh, yeah.
We all have stress, and how we handle it can have a direct impact on our health. So what's maybe stressful to me is not stressful to you.
Right.
So it's really individualized on how we deal with stress. And if we don't control it, if we don't do well with it, it can lead to problems, especially with cardiovascular disease. Poor diet. When we talk about blood pressure, we talk about sodium.
Right.
When we talk about diet, we talk about cholesterol and fatty
Once
fatty
again,
foods.
ticking all those boxes if you just do a whole kind of regimen of it, right?
Yeah, and we'll kind of wrap that up at the end. I have an analogy
Well, Mike,
with that.
these are some great things for us to keep in mind, and folks, we got a lot more to talk to you about, so please don't go anywhere. Stay with us.
I
think the most pleasant surprise when we turned 65 and signed up for Medicare Part B was finding out about our Welcome to Medicare preventive visit.
It was free, and it gave us the opportunity to visit with our doctors and establish a plan for our health going forward.
They reviewed our medical history, measured our height, weight, blood pressure, and counseled us on other risk factors.
To learn more about Medicare's free or low-cost preventive and wellness benefits, call your local SHIP counselor at 800-551-3191. I mentioned it's free, right?
Twice.
Elder abuse is a growing problem, and it's happening right here in our Montana communities. At least 1 in 10 older adults are victims of physical or emotional abuse, financial exploitation, or neglect. To get help or report elder abuse, call your local area agency on aging or Adult Protective Services at 1-844-277-9300.
I was the last guy you'd expect to get diabetes. I was a competitive runner and I always took care of myself. So when I was diagnosed, it kind of threw me. But it's really encouraging to know I'm not alone with it. There are a lot of other people going through the same things as I am. It takes some effort. You have to keep after it. Exercise, meds, and diet are the key. But there are a lot of folks who want me to succeed. Diabetes is not the end of the world. With effort and attitude, you can have a normal life.
Flight 109, is that Evel Knievel on the runway?
Whoa, Daredevil. You need a Montana Real ID to fly. Go to mtrealid.gov to make an appointment.
Looks easier than jumping a canyon.
Smile. I see you changed your name from Robert to Evil. Did you bring your name change documentation?
I'm not trying to pull a stunt. Got the paperwork right there.
Go to mtrealid.gov.
Now I can fly. It's that easy.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Aging Horizons. We're talking about cardiovascular disease today with Mike McNamara. And Mike, we were just going over a few of the risk factors. Let's finish up that conversation before we move on, because those are important ones. There's a couple more we should talk about.
Yeah, excessive alcohol intake can have a detrimental effect on cardiovascular risk. And you know, the recommendation is for a woman no more than 1 drink a day, and men 2. So that's 1 glass of wine or 1 beer or 1 mixed drink for a woman, and 2 of the same for men. And then lastly, when we talk about kind of one that's more unique to stroke, is atrial fibrillation. It's an irregular heartbeat, and that's a big driver for stroke too. So if you have that, you certainly would want to be on medications to control your heart rate, and then medications to control the clotting factors.
And be aware of it to begin with.
And be aware of it,
yeah.
Right.
Well, which kind of brings me to a piece that we really need to go over, and that is some definitions, because you've talked about heart attack and stroke.
Right.
Well, we know they're not the same, but we don't know what the difference is. Can you explain?
Yeah, there's some similarities between the two, but there's also a big difference between them. You know, a heart attack happens in the heart, a stroke happens in the brain. Usually what happens with a heart attack is, for one reason or another, a blood clot will lodge itself into a coronary artery in the heart, essentially plugging that artery completely up. And that prevents blood from flowing into the heart muscle itself, and that blood is carrying oxygen and nutrients that keep our heart muscle alive. So if that clot is in there, what happens is all of the tissue downstream from that clot is not getting the things that it needs to live, so it'll start to die.
Got it.
So that's kind of what a heart attack is just lack of blood flow to one part of the heart, typically caused by a blood clot.
Okay.
And for a stroke, there are 2 basic types of strokes. One is called an ischemic stroke. And that's very similar to a heart attack. It's caused by a blockage in the artery, but this time in the brain. So the same thing, if you get a blood clot in there that plugs that artery up, everything downstream from that is going to potentially die. Okay. And the other type of stroke is hemorrhagic stroke, and that simply means that a blood vessel in the brain ruptures and then bleeding happens inside the brain. The ischemic stroke is far more common. We're talking about 85 to 90% of the strokes are the ischemic ones caused by the blood clot, and the remainders are caused by the bleeding type of a stroke. So similarities and some differences in there.
Sure. And also, let's talk about some symptoms because these are both, again, these are treatable.
Right.
A heart attack and a stroke can be treatable,
Sure.
but we need to recognize what we're trying to treat. So let's talk about heart attack first.
Well, heart attack, and I think I've talked about this before here, that Hollywood has really done us a disservice with showing us what a heart attack looks like.
That's not true.
The Fred Sanford where he's holding his chest. That can actually happen. I mean, people certainly have the crushing chest pain, but more often than not, the symptoms are a bit more subtle. And especially for women, the symptoms might be different for women. Typically, it's chest pressure or pain. Could be pain that radiates down the arm, could be pain in the upper back or discomfort in the upper back. Shortness of breath is a big one, sweating, nausea. And when I worked with cardiac patients, at least for women, one of the most common ones that I saw was pain radiating up the neck into the jaw.
Wow.
So if you have jaw pain, you probably wouldn't correlate that with a heart attack. So, and that certainly is one of the strong signs for a woman. And for a stroke, for a heart attack, the symptoms can come on gradually and kind of build.
Okay.
For a stroke, the difference is the symptoms happen very suddenly. And we like to use an acronym called B-FAST.
Okay.
So the B is balance. So you might have problems standing, you might have problems walking, and this hits you just like that. The E stands for eyes. You might have problems with vision in one or both eyes or double vision. The F stands for face, and sometimes when people have a stroke, they suffer from facial droop.
Sure.
So their face is paralyzed, so one side will not move and it'll droop.
Right.
The S stands for speech. You might not be able to speak. You might have garbled speech. The S stands for, where are we at, S?
Yeah.
Oh, speech, that was the S.
Speech.
A, I think I missed A.
Yeah.
I misspelled it. So A is arms.
Okay. Sure.
Typically what happens when somebody has a stroke is it affects one side of their body. So you'd ask somebody to put their arms out, and either this arm wouldn't come up or it would drift away. And then the T stands for time. It's very important that if you notice these symptoms in you or somebody else, that they get treatment right away. And that, a heart attack and stroke are medical emergencies, so we really encourage people to call 911. People that arrive by ambulance get treatment much faster. If you're in a rural area, I would still recommend calling 911 and say, we're going to meet the ambulance. If you live out of town, we'll meet you en route so you can get into the ambulance and get treatment started right away and get into the hospital and get treatment faster.
And I think we should say also, if you think you're having some symptoms, go ahead and call 911.
That's right.
Don't wait. Don't think, it's not. If you feel any of these and you want to just get checked out as one should, give a call.
That's right, because if you get treatment early, you can reverse the detrimental effects of it.
Exactly.
You can interrupt it. You can interrupt a heart attack and prevent you from having muscle damage in your heart, prevent death.
Yeah.
And for a stroke, there are things that can be done to interrupt the stroke as well and restore the blood flow to the brain, and so you don't lose as many brain cells and you don't have deficits from that stroke.
We're going to talk about those things, folks. We were going to tell you how these things can be treated. Don't go away. You'll want to find out.
Respite. It's okay to need it. It's okay to want it. Will you provide it?
The hard part about having outside help is that there's not a lot of people out there who can do that kind of work. We've been very fortunate that our Bonnie has been with us for 7 years. I don't know what I'd do without her. I need her in our lives. She's our second mother. And I can't help but think of her that way.
To find out how to change lives, including your own, call 800-224-6034 or visit respite.mt.gov.
Questions about Medicare and other types of insurance? Contact the State Health Insurance Assistance Program office to get answers to questions like, what is the difference between Medicare and Medicaid? And how do you decide if you need Medicare supplemental insurance? This insurance counseling program is not a sales program. It is available to provide answers to your insurance questions. For more information, call the State Health Insurance Assistance Program Office at 1-800-332-2272.
I have so many questions about power of attorney.
Well, some powers of attorney are for finances and others are for healthcare decisions.
A power of attorney designates an agent who would make decisions on your behalf.
While making a power of attorney, you have the ability to control your agent's power.
You also have the ability to decide when that POA would take effect.
Wait, am I giving away all my rights?
Power of attorney isn't a license to make any decision for you, just those that you've specified.
Your agent should be somebody that's working in your best interest, but it should also be somebody that you would trust.
What if they try to abuse their power?
Protective measures like third-party accounting, secondary signatures, defined spending and gifting limits can help protect against financial exploitation. An agent's powers can always be limited by a customized power of attorney, and they can be revoked by you or the court if the power of attorney is abused.
So carefully drafted estate planning documents can help ensure that your finances are monitored, but not abused.
If you or someone you know is being exploited, please report to Aging Services Bureau at 844-277-9300 or the Legal Service Developer at 1-800-332-2272. This message sponsored by the DPHHS Aging Service Bureau.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Aging Horizons. We're talking about cardiovascular disease today with Mike McNamara. Mike, again, so glad to have you here. We were talking about the sort of signs and things that can happen to you through stroke or heart attack. Now let's talk about how to treat this stuff and what we can do to be healthy.
That's right. Well, fortunately there are treatments for heart attack and stroke. The real key is making sure you get in time to take advantage of the treatments. For stroke, every minute that goes by when you're having a stroke, we're losing, 1.9 million brain cells. That's been the estimation.
It's hard to wrap your head around that, but
Yeah, so we don't want to be experiencing the symptoms of stroke and then try to talk ourselves out of going to the, calling 911 and sit there and hope it goes away, because while that's happening, we're losing brain cells. And if you're like me, you can't afford to lose any brain cells.
Exactly, I am like you.
So the sooner the treatment begins, the better. And for both of them, if you wait too long, it kind of disqualifies some of the treatment options that are available to you. So let's just talk a little bit about heart attack.
Okay.
I mentioned earlier that typically what causes a heart attack is a blood clot lodges itself into the coronary artery, stops the blood flow, and that's where we start having cardiac death. Cells start to die because they're not getting blood, they're not getting oxygen, nutrients, so they start to die. So we want to get that blood clot out of there as fast as we can.
Right.
Because if we can get the blood back in there, it's going to limit the amount of cells that die.
Okay.
So there are two basic ways that this happens. One is by giving a clot-busting medication.
Okay.
So there's a medication that can be given that will dissolve that clot and restore the blood flow into the heart, saves that tissue. We're not disabled. We
can move on.
Can move on. But again, there's a shelf life with that. I mean, it's not going to work 2 days after you have it. I mean, the heart attack's already happened and it's going to be too late. So that's the first way to treat it, and that's typically the way that it's treated in rural Montana with the clot busting medications.
Yes.
If you're in a larger town in Montana, the best option is to actually go into the cardiac catheterization lab, and they can actually go into your heart and physically remove the clot. Okay, so that gets rid of the clot, blood flow is restored, and they'll usually put a coronary stent in there.
Okay.
And the stent is just a little mesh metal device that kind of props the artery open to keep it open so blood flows down in there. The whole goal is to restore blood flow.
Sure.
So whether it's with a clot-busting medication or physically going in and removing it, whichever one of those is available to you is the best option for you.
Okay, gotcha.
So again, restoring blood flow as quickly as possible limits the amount of tissue damage. Now for a stroke, it's very similar. If you have a hemorrhagic stroke, then you're going to potentially be set up for some sort of surgical intervention where they go in and try to stop the bleeding. But for the most common type of stroke, the ischemic stroke, the treatments are very similar to what it is for a heart attack.
Oh, okay.
Again, there's a clot-busting medication that can be used to try to dissolve that clot that's in the brain. Again, we're trying to get rid of that clot so we can get blood flow back into the brain.
Right.
And just recently, there's been some newer techniques called mechanical thrombectomy where they actually go in, very similar to going into the heart and pulling that clot physically out. They're doing that in the brain now, where they can go in there and actually pull that clot out. And that's kind of been a revolution recently, because the clot busting medications, you have to have that done within the first 4.5 hours. If you're out past that, you're not going to qualify for the drug, and you're kind of stuck with what you have. Mechanical thrombectomy patients, they can actually go out to 24 hours after symptom onset. But as always with both of those treatment options, the sooner you do it, the better the outcome is. And right now, Montana only has one mechanical thrombectomy hospital at St. Pat's in Missoula, and I'm hearing that the hospitals in Billings are looking at adding that as well. So typically what has happened in the past is, if you weren't kind of on the western part of the state to go to Missoula, you would have to get transferred to Denver or Salt Lake City or even Seattle to have that mechanical thrombectomy. So there are treatments available.
Good.
But again, the key is time. The sooner you can get in, the better. And you had mentioned earlier that we always want to prevent things as opposed to treating them. That's always better. So let's kind of quickly go over some things that kind of is the cornerstone for either preventing the first one or preventing another one from happening.
Exactly.
We talked about the high blood pressure, the cholesterol, the diabetes, and the impact that exercise has on that, and the impact that diet has on it. But I also want to talk just briefly about medication. Great medications to treat all of those conditions.
Right.
But those medications only work when you take them.
Exactly.
You know, in the case of high blood pressure and high cholesterol, there's no symptoms. You and I could be sitting here now, and our blood pressure could be 200 over 100, and our cholesterol could be well over 300, and we would feel fine.
Right.
So when you give somebody a medicine to try to help those conditions, sometimes they want to take it because they feel fine. So medication, what we're eating, and exercise, those are really the keys for preventing the initial event, and also the same for preventing a secondary prevention. So those are the keys.
It's not, as I say so often, it's not brain surgery, but we're human beings, and we don't always want to do what's good for us, but these are some great tips and some great flags to tell us about what we should be looking for. Thanks so much, Mike, for coming to be with us today. We really appreciate your time. And folks, we talked about some scary things today, but we also talked about ways that you can prevent this kind of scary health condition. And if all you have to do is make that commitment to yourself, and you're going to get a healthier person and a healthier life. For Aging Horizons, I'm Kimmy Overman.
Special thanks to the Department of Public Health and Human Services for their continued support. Hosts on Aging Horizons are program specialists at the Montana Office on Aging. Production facilities provided by Video Express Productions. For more information about Aging Horizons, call the Department of Public Health and Human Services toll-free at 800-332-2272.